discuss the causes of corruption, socio-political, economic context in India, the anti-corruption regime in India. I would not dwell much on the legal aspects because it itself is a huge subject and it may be very draining for everybody here. They can of course go to specific websites to understand the anti-corruption regime, but I will touch on it to give the context. The ethics which is in practice today, and what are the good governance strategies which can reduce corruption. Now before I start my presentation, I will just try to build in the context through a film. This movie is a 3-minute movie which was uploaded. It is available on the YouTube website, and it is based on produced in Jelson Natural Film Festival, and it is something which you can relate in India also. It's a Spanish 3-minute film on how the bureaucracy functions.
Hello. Hello, sir. It's Sushma here.
Yeah.
Hello, Devesh. Sir, can you just play the video using that option, sir? Share file including video. Audio is not audible, I think.
Okay.
Can you just play it again? Yeah. Hello.
Is it okay now?
Hello, sir. Sushma here. Sir, you did that option, sir. Share file. I don't think you have done that.
No, I've done it. I've done it now. See?
Because again the audio is not coming.
Not coming.
Yeah, you just
Share.
go to open the file again. Share including the video.
Yeah, that's what I've done. Saying you are not ready to share and including the video.
Thank you, sir. Now it's coming. Yeah.
Sorry, actually it was not supported. Sorry for that small technical issue, but what you saw was something which is a very common sight even in India at the grassroots level, and the relationship between public servant and a citizen is often adversarial, and that has led to a lot of debate on the issue of corruption and how citizen-centric governance can be achieved. And so we will just discuss this in the next 50 minutes or so. This was the courtesy this YouTube film which is available and can be downloaded also. So what is the definition of corruption? Well, Oxford definition is a dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery, A World Bank definition says it's abuse of public power for private benefits, so it's basically centered around public servant. And India, under the PC Act and even under the IPC, it's the public servant or a person expecting to be a public servant taking gratification other than legal remuneration in respect to an official act. So primarily what we see is that when we discuss corruption, there has to be two sides. One is the supply side and one is the demand side. The demand side is the public servant and the supply side could be a corporate house or an individual person or citizen, someone like that, who is interested in getting some work done in a wrong way or even a right way. The fight against corruption is a very long drawn fight. If you recall that this is a famous quote, of course in Hindi translated in English by Chanakya from Arthashastra, that just as a fish moving underwater cannot possibly be found out either as drinking or not drinking water, so government servants employed in the government work cannot be found out taking money for themselves. And therefore in Arthashastra he has described not only corruption but also measures to be taken to fight it. Then we come to the colonial rule, where corruption in civil servants increased many folds during the colonial times due to unbridled power of bureaucracy. And if the historians will confirm that Warren Hastings, the Governor General of India, was impeached for corruption, including the looting of the wealth of Begums of Awadh when he went back. And then we came that as a legacy, it was also part of our independent India. Now, how do you measure corruption? Of course, one of the well accepted, internationally, globally accepted measurement is through the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. And in India's ranking in 2013 was to 94 in 177 countries, which has come down to 76 and now 79 in 2016. So there has been a very positive trend towards the perception about corruption in the global level as far as India is concerned. Between 2015 and 16, we won't say there is a much of a difference because number of countries surveyed in 2015 was just 168 as compared to 176 in 2016. So that ranking is more or less, it has reduced from 94 and it is around 76 or so. And that is one perception which is commonly used. And of course now the Central Vigilance Commission is coming out with a concept of integrity index, where we will be able to measure corruption and integrity levels of various organizations, public sector undertakings, and maybe government ministries, departments also. Now, how do you categorize the corrupt practices? As I had mentioned earlier, it is again based on the common perception of a common man about corruption. And as we have mentioned earlier, there is a bribe giver and there is a bribe taker. So one of the worst kind of corruption, I will term it as extortive corruption, where it's an extortion of a by a public servant against a citizen. So examples of this extortive corruption could be a land revenue, for example, a deliberate manipulation of land records and consequential gratification to correct them, or maybe police lodging false FIRs and seeking gratification to close the case. This happens at many places. Or maybe tax administration, where you develop fabricated case of tax evasion and demand gratification to close it. Or maybe inspectors seeking gratification from any business or unit or industry or a startup. So in fact, I will just recall that we were discussing this issue of ease of doing business with some of these IIT Kanpur alumni friends, and what they mentioned was that regarding this fourth aspect of inspectors, that they, in fact, one of them coined a very interesting term of KKHD. They said in our own informal book of records of expenditure, we keep a head of KKHD, which is Kutte ko haddi dalo, which means that the inspector will come and just for us to run the business in a very proper way, in a very smooth way, we'll have to offer some gratification. Otherwise, they will create problems. They will find something or the other, some sort of shortcomings, and start issuing notices to us. So to remove this harassment, to reduce this harassment, citizens or the business partners are to shell out some money. There is an extreme form of corruption. Then the second level comes then exploitative corruption, where a citizen seeks some service which is due to him or her, and it has to be provided as a matter of right or entitlement. For example, issuing a ration card to eligible beneficiaries, a copy of record of rights in the village or in the cities, mutation of names due to death of someone, and the inheritance has to be recorded, or maybe just providing subsidized food grains to Antyodaya or BPL families. So here there is an entitlement, citizen demands it, and there is a gratification required by a public servant. Again, this is exploitative. It may not be extortive, but it's exploitative where civil servants are doing something. The collusion is not there because a citizen is forced to give bribe because they want something which is as part of the entitlement of the right. Then this is the third kind of corruption which is often justified in developing countries. That is corruption as a lubricant. The gratification is in view of hastening the delivery of a service which is as per entitlement. So various licenses, you will get it as a routine maybe in a few months. But if you grease the palm of public servants, then you can get it fast. And it is said that for a developing country, it is something which is inevitable. Now, the point is, as we say that there cannot be a good terrorism or bad terrorism, or good terrorist or bad terrorist. Similarly, you cannot have a good corruption or a bad corruption. A corruption is a corruption. So if you want to issue, and here the collusive element between the bribe giver and bribe taker comes in the fore. For example, issue of driver's license. So you can get a driver's license by conducting through a test where you can fail or pass, and then going through a process. But if I am not so much inclined to take that time off, then I may grease the palm of a middleman, and then that through them spend 5 or 10,000 or 15,000 rupees to get a license without going through that process, which was a due process. Similarly, issue of passport. You can get a passport through a due process in a few weeks after you apply, but then you want to get it early. You had some urgent foreign visit, and then you use some middleman, some conduit. So these sort of corruption is where the citizen also colludes with the public servant to get something which was due, but they want it very fast. So what we see is slowly and steadily we are increasing the collusion part of the public servant or a civil servant with the public servant. And then the fourth is the collusive corruption, where gratification is for providing a service which is otherwise not entitled for a person. So there are many facets of it. Overlooking an illegal construction. So we have development authorities, municipal corporations, their officials not taking action against any illegal construction, and then also getting some gratification in view of it, because the citizen or the person owner of the property knows that he is also doing something wrong, but deliberately they do it, and then that continues. And we have honorable courts hitting hard on the development authorities and municipal corporations, saying that this is a failure of the state machinery. Allotment of land to eligible persons, again collusive corruption. Issue of ration card or any other benefits like social security benefits to ineligible persons. And this is a typical situation in railway station where there is an out of turn allotment of rail berth, where a person comes and wants to have a comfortable move, and he's not reserved, he or she has not reserved any berth, and then there is people surrounding the ticket checker, and then there are few berths available, and then a person feels a sense of achievement when he gets that berth by paying 400, 500 rupees extra over and above the charges. So this is a sort of collusive corruption where citizen also colludes with the public servant to get something which the person is not entitled to. And the fifth kind of corruption is something which is corruption for goodwill. It is just that you are not taking any decision, but the person in power, the private party wants the person in power to be in his or her good books. So you have festive occasions like Diwali or Holi or Eid or something like that, or New Year's, where instead of a token sort of festival gift like a diary or maybe half a kg of sweets, you have gold coins and big gifts being transferred to public servants, and there you have a corruption only for goodwill. And we have the liquor lobbies in state governments also providing expensive gifts to public servants just to ensure that there is a goodwill for the future. So this is something which is also in practice where there is no decision required to for any gratification, but gratification is only to ensure that the goodwill remains in future, and it is used sometime, and it is against the conduct rules of public servant. Then we have corruption for influencing policy, which is now we are moving towards the policy level, where the collusion is too much. In fact, now the private partner is dominating the public servant. So we have some examples like paddy procurement, where there are rice millers association, for example, and there is the government. So what should be the percentage of recovery of the paddy which is purchased from farmers to convert into rice which is used for the PDS? So even a 0.25% change in fixing the recovery will benefit or will bring loss to the paddy, the rice millers, and that negotiation can lead to some corrupt practices which is not in public interest. Another example is payment of farmers for sugar cane, where farmers, whether they are paid within a week or 2 weeks or 1 week, depends on the financial. Of course, it depends on the financial capabilities and the sugar prices, but it also depends on what is the relationship between the government and the sugar cane industries. And there also there could be corruption for influencing policies, which may lead to citizens suffering, and also the government or the state machinery also not suffering some losses. Of course, there is a particular category of frauds and fudging where the public is not involved directly, but there could be financial cash misappropriation or embezzlement, where the public servant himself or herself cheats the state exchequer. So we have salami frauds in banks, we have public funds put in private accounts. There have been instances of public servants, especially in remote and inaccessible parts of the country. They've taken out public funds from the government funds of various government schemes. They've taken out to put it in the accounts of private banks and commercial banks on their personal names, and they've kept it in that for 6 to 8 to 9 months to earn interest, which is used for their personal benefit, and putting the amount back to the treasury and use it for public services, which was designed. But that 8-9 months of temporary embezzlement for personal gain is something which is completely illegal, and it is a corrupt behavior. So that sort of frauds and fudging goes on where the public directly is not involved, but then the state machinery suffers and government suffers. And of course, I would also rate fraudulent statements are kind of corruption, where you have balance sheets which are fudged, you have progress reports and over-reporting of progress, which again, because it is a corrupt practice, because it leads to corruption, because once a head of any organization over-reports some sort of progress, then it encourages corruption and fudging and also misappropriation of funds at the grassroots level. And the last kind of corruption.
So sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, can you just share the PPT file, sir?
Pardon?
Sir, PPT file, your PPT, can you just share it? It's not there now.
Oh, I thought I had shared it.
Can you just share? Yeah.
Is it shared? Is it shared? Is it shared or not?
Sir, now it's not coming. Can you just do that share file PPT?
No.
Yeah, now it's coming. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so now it's coming. You can.
So the eighth kind of corruption is the conspiracy of silence or acts of omission, and this is very important kind of issue, which is a very critical issue, which is now being discussed, deliberated, and debated. And this is where the post and consequential perks to a political, executive, or a civil servant can continue only, and the person is allowed to hold the office only the time he or she is a facilitator of a corrupt practice at the grassroots level, and he or she does not hinder that corrupt practice. For example, there are states, I will not know them, but everybody knows, where a collector or an SSP will continue to work in a district only till the time the vested interests are not hit. If he or she starts delivering of services as per the norms and as per what is expected, that is to bring in the rule of law, prevent leakages, implement the schemes as per the government orders or government dictates, then it comes in direct conflict with the vested interests, and there is a transfer or there are some harassment. So then it leads to a situation where these officials, the high officials sitting maybe in the secretariat or maybe in the field level, they know that something is going wrong, but they will not act so as they are supposed to act, and they keep silent. They continue enjoying the perks. They themselves may not be dishonest, or they may not be actually doing of facilitating that act, but they are not undertaking the responsibility which was entrusted upon them, that is to protect the public interest and to stop all the leakages or the corrupt action which is going on down the line or up the system. And since they fail to undertake this duty, it leads to something of conspiracy of silence or omission, and that is now being questioned by the people, and even such officials or officers are now being blamed for inaction, and action has been taken against them. So this is something which was some sort of the system was lenient on such kinds of things because they thought that the individual officer is honest, but somehow others have taken some, but he or she was not strict, or he had not performed his duty of undertaking some harsh action, and because of that some corrupt behavior was noticed or some scam was noticed, the person was spared, considering his own reputation. But today that is not the situation. Even if the reputation is good, but if you fail to act or you omitted action, then also there is a charge of corrupt behavior. So we have seen 7 sorts of different corruption: extortive, exploitative, frauds and fudging, lubrication, goodwill, influencing policy, and collusive. And we see that the involvement of public servant is high at all the levels, but involvement of private persons or the citizens is as low for extortive, exploitative. And therefore the question comes, when we have the PC Act where the bribe giver and bribe taker are both equally liable, criminally liable, should a situation of extortive and exploitative corruption, should it be covered equally as compared to the collusive corruption? And this is something which is a debate which goes on in Indian context, which is not well understood at the international level. So in the Prevention of Corruption Act, there are provisions where such sort of exploitative, extortive corruption needs to be protected, so that the common citizen, while he or she is being exploited by the public servants, should not be exploited by the machinery of anti-corruption body who finally catches or such people, such public servants for some action or this kind of behavior. Now let's discuss the theoretical framework for corruption, and one of the model which I find to be very useful in understanding, especially in Indian context, is the Cresy's thought triangle, which has 3 pillars for corruption. One is opportunity, the other one is unreasonable demand or unreasonable need, and the third one is ability to rationalize. So what are these 3 issues? We start with the opportunity part. Opportunity is how much opportunity the system is giving to the public servant to become corrupt. So what issues are to be addressed is how are the internal systems, the governance, whether there is a discretion available with the public servant where corruption can take place, or whether there is opaqueness in any public policy processes. So these are the issues, the opportunity part, which is something which is easier to control in the system because we can use technology, we can use many improve our processes and procedures. We have the RTI Act where we can bring in transparency and reduce the opportunity, reduce the discretion where opportunity for a public servant to undertake fraud or corruption can be controlled. The second aspect is the unreasonable need, where we have the socio-economic systems. The unreasonable need is again something which is part of the society. So what is normally said that post 1991, where before that the salaries of public servants were more or less higher or at par with those the equivalent in the corporate sector or the private sector. In fact, the private sector salaries used to catch up with the public sector through when the pay commissions used to come. But after 1991, it has become the reverse. So now in the 6th, 7th pay commission, what has happened is that it is the public sector salaries which are catching up with the private sector. So because of that, there is the public servant when compares his or her living style with their private sector counterparts, and then there is this unsatiated need which develops, and then the tendency becomes to rationalize and start gathering those sort of living styles. It could be some different types of gadgets, electronic gadgets, or maybe going to a big hotels or restaurants just to ensure that their living style is similar to their counterparts in private sector, and which is not something which is not which is beyond their means, and then they start rationalizing, and this leads to corrupt behavior. Now, this is something which society has to see. Pay commissions can increase the salary, but then the unsatiated needs or the rationalization because of that is something which can continue, and still there will be an issue. So society has to take care of this. We can only take care of the opportunity part. Then ability to rationalize is something where, for example, it is related to morality and ethics, social norms. How many times we have listened that a person कहते हैं कि जब घर में 3 लड़कियां पैदा हो गई हैं तो अब हमें उनके डाउरी के लिए पैसा तो इकट्ठा, दहेज के लिए तो पैसा इकट्ठा करना ही है. Now, this is a sort of rationalization. The point is, how can you rationalize that just because you have 2 or 3 daughters, why can't you make them self-reliant so that they earn on their own and you don't have to fall into the trap of a dowry? And the other part is the person who's taking a dowry. How can you take a dowry? It is illegal in any case, but how can you demand a dowry without even understanding whether that family has that sort of financial capabilities to give the dowry? And if he or the parents are giving the dowry, but is it a fact that will it not be from the corrupt means? So this is some sort of rationalization which helps within the society, which leads to corrupt behavior. Now, these are the 2 aspects which the society as a whole has to deal with it. But governance primarily deals with opportunity, how the internal systems and a legal framework can improve so that the opportunity of corruption reduces. But ultimately, all the 3 pillars have to work together to get sort of society which has more transparency and more ethics and probity in the system. Now, again, explaining this Tracy's fraud triangle in terms of our own context. So first, we discuss the political causes of corruption. So we have this, which is a part of our democracy, and it is a good vibrant democracy where we have the first past the post system where it doesn't require a majority vote to win elections. But then when you look at in terms of earlier, we used to have a very low voter turnout, and particularly in urban areas. So we had 40 to 50% votes being polled. So imagine a population of 100. A country where only say around 70% are above 18 years of age. Out of that 70%, you have a voting percentage of 50%, which means 35% vote. And in a multi-cornered contest, we have 30% vote share percentage. So 10 out of you just have to manage 10 votes out of that 100 to win an election. And then you have this sort of situation, then there are tendencies of voting based on caste, community lines, strategic, negative, all sorts of voting goes on because one has to manage only 10% of the total population. And then we have coupled with the era of coalition governments when these things become even more manifest. So what happens is instead of governance takes a backseat when there is a low voter turnout, people don't come to vote, and the governance takes a backseat. Voting is on based of other lines, and then then people start managing votes through bribing the voters. So we have high cost of fighting in election, more than the ceiling of Chief Election Commission, Central Election Commission. So we have election funding through the black money. So these are the issues which ultimately are starting point of any corrupt behavior of public servant. Because if the political system comes in with some sort of vested interest, then obviously the public servant will either can be easily collude to have a corrupt behavior which citizen will suffer. So I can just give this 2 quotes which best explains this situation. A bad politician is elected by good people who do not vote. So that is the first quote, which now we know that even the election commission is moving ahead for increasing the voting percentage. So we now fortunately are having even urban areas and rural areas both 65 to 70% of voting, and which is a good for democracy because then governance becomes more important than other factors. But even if people vote, there is another quote which says people that elect corrupt politicians are not victims but accomplices. So ultimately people have to vote. How the people, the citizens of the country in a democracy give signals to the political executive. This is how the political executive will behave, and in turn the public servants will behave. So what is the way forward? Of course, there is a debate of transparency in funding of political parties, state funding of elections. which is a difficult exercise. More and more citizens should participate in voting. Then the attitude of citizens should be towards governance, towards winning a candidate who fulfills all the requirements. It should not be a situation of electing a lesser of the evil. So we should have maybe that nota should be formalized, none of the above category, and if the 50%, more than 50% voters say none of the above category, maybe that election should be, those candidates should be disqualified and new election should be held for that constituency. These are the possible political reforms or electoral reforms which may help in guiding this cause, of which is a political cause. Then we come the administrators, where the public servants come in. So there is a huge misuse of transfer and posting in some cases, and this misuse of transfer posting leads to an informal spoil system. And when payments, when takebacks are paid to get a posting and also to continue with that posting, then we can understand that governance will suffer and corrupt behavior will be increased, because there is a sort of protection to that officer who is posted after paying some money. And all the big scams when you discuss in details, if you want analyzes in details in the field level, it links to how the transfers and postings are misused in the system. And this also leads to protection of civil servants on caste and communal lines, which happens in many of the administrative systems, which causes even a corrupt civil servant of a particular caste being protected by a political executive who is of the same caste, and this being used to perpetuate bad governance, malgovernance, and also encourage political corrupt behavior. So this is something which even the Honorable Supreme Court has come up with the guidelines for how to manage transfer and postings of police officers or civil servants. But the implementation in some states have been very good, and in some we have variable situation. But this is one of the major issues which will need to be addressed to ensure that the corruption in the system is reduced, and the public servants are posted on merit, and they don't have this protection of unethical means to continue at particular place. So again, there is a quote that if an officer is honest, he will work for the people. If an officer is dishonest, he will work for us. So it's a very sarcastic comment on some of the people, which some of the theory of maybe some of the political executives, and one has to guard against that. So what are the way forward here? We have obviously it is closely linked to the political reforms. There is a critical link of the highest or CM office to ensure that such things do not happen, and one controls the way the transfers are being handled by various ministries and departments. And then insulating transfer and postings from petty politics, and we should have rotation transfer policy. Rotation transfer policy is which is now Government of India is being practicing all these issues of probity, where you identify sensitive posts, and in sensitive posts one tries to remove the officer if there is a fixed tenure of say 2 to 3 years, and officers are transferred from one sensitive post to other non-sensitive other post, so that they don't develop any sort of any personal interest in continuing there, which may lead to more corrupt behavior. But this rotation transfer policy is very important tool to ensure that the public servants behave properly, and they being in a position for a very long time, they are not able to develop any vested interest and create some sort of mafia type of culture in that department or the ministry. So all these issues are very important when we talk of causes of corruption in an administrative regime. Then legal regime, of course, we have a lot of acts and laws which strictly define penalties for corrupt behavior. But the effectiveness of these penal provisions are whether there is a certainty of punishment, what is the severity of punishment, and how is the swiftness. And we know that there is severity in our penal provisions, but certainty is something which is always in question, and swiftness is again in question. So all the three have to come together to ensure that these penal provisions become an actual deterrent. And on the fourth aspect is, of course, that we have to protect the honest against undue harassment if some mistakes are done in a modified way. So all the four issues have to be addressed when our penal provisions are implemented, and government is taking a lot of actions in this, how to ensure that the severity is there, how to ensure that there is certainty. We have more and more special courts of CBI designated courts for anti-corruption, trying anti-corruption offences, so that there is certainty of punishment and also swiftness of punishment. So these are very important issues. We have good laws, but the implementation also has to be in the same spirit. In the social, we have already discussed about the post-91 era. What has happened over the years is that there is an increased social acceptance of them. So no matter how it comes, it is accepted. And we have seen a disdainful, sympathetic attitude towards honest officers who are living modestly within their means. This is very, very unfortunate. They are considered as something very stupid, or they are considered to be timid, or they are considered to be non-courageous, that they are working in an honest and simple and living simple lives. Earlier we know that in our society itself, a simple living was considered to be very, very saintly and very, very at high pedestal. We have the model of our Mahatma Gandhi, who used to have a very simple life, no matter how. But over the years, especially after 91, in a society, we have started developing this disdainful attitude towards honest officers, and this has also led to people crossing the fence because of the family pressures. So this has again something which the society as a whole has to deal apart from the legal and the administrative system. So we just shortly go through the anti-corruption regime just to give the background of how everything is being covered under this. So first we start with the transparency. We have the Right to Information Act, where we have the Central Information Commission and the State Information Commissions, which ensure that the government or the government functionaries work in a transparent manner, and all the documents related to decision making where some important decisions are required are kept in the public regime. So the public servants are also alert that there could be any citizen can take hold of these documents and can use it to show that there was some sort of corrupt behavior undertaken or some personal favors were given to private parties. Then we come to the audit of public expenditure. When some expenditure is made, we have Article 148 to 151 of Constitution, where the Comptroller and Auditor General's responsibilities and powers are defined, and the Comptroller and Auditor General for the CAG of India undertakes the audits of public fund, and it reports to the Parliament, and the Parliament Accounts Committee or the PSC undertakes this scrutiny, and many of the big scams of the country have been reported through the CAG, in which investigation have been taken and public servants have been penalized. So this is a very important watchdog body. Then we come apart from the audit, we have the public servants complaints against public servants. Here the CVC comes into picture, the Chief Vigilance Commission, which is part of the statutory through the Statutory Act of CVC Act, and the CVC works with the chief vigilance officers of various organizations. These chief vigilance officers have to report to CVC even though they work as part of those organizations. And any complaints against public servants are processed through the chief vigilance officers, and then action taken against them under the disciplinary and appeal rules. And the disciplinary authorities, CVC is an advisory body. It advises action against disciplinary disciplinary proceedings or other criminal action against those officials who are found after an inquiry to be liable for charge against of any irregularities or corrupt behavior, and the disciplinary authority takes action as per the disciplinary and appeal rules for civil servants. However, if the complainant has a fear of life and wants protection, there is this Whistleblower Protection Act of 2014, which when it comes into force will ensure that protection to the whistleblower, and so that he or she is not undue harassed or no physical harm is undertaken on him just because a complaint has been filed. Then we come to the anti-corruption regime. So if the complaint is of some, so there is a difference between complaint of corruption or irregularity and how it can be translated into a criminal intent where the personal gains are there, where the person has taken illegal gratification and the evidence is very strong. We go into the regime of corruption, where we have the Lokpal Lok Ayukt Act, which has been passed and it has to come in operation. We have already the CVC Act. We have the Delhi Police Establishment Act, under which the CBI operates and undertakes anti-corruption investigation when matters are are referred to them. And of course, the overriding principle is under the Prevention of Corruption Act, and all these systems are follow are the legal regimes, and the organizations are the Central CBI, the Chief Vigilance Commission, and the disciplinary authority who sanctions prosecution of this, public servants. Now, this whole regime is for criminal prosecution of public servants in corruption cases. And of course, we have the economic crimes where once if the money is slashed abroad or it is laundered to some other purpose, maybe for Birami transactions of land, or maybe cash which is kept, or maybe gold, then we have the PMLA, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, in which the Enforcement Directorate and the SFIU comes into force. So we have a multiplicity of agencies undertaking these tasks. There are oversight bodies which the regime is very strong. Indian anti-corruption regime is very strong. The acts are very strong, and because of which only that there are a lot of corruption has been noticed and action is being taken. And then we have the oversight, anti-corruption oversight, where we have the public servant and the government coupled with the role of vibrant media, the independent judiciary, and an active civil society, which ultimately completes the whole cycle of the anti-corruption regime. Of course, we have a few more things to come, the gaps in legislation which have to be addressed, where we have this proposed amendment of Prevention of Corruption Act, where the supply side of corruption, which is the active bribery, at present is not directly covered. So it is only covered as some as abetment to bribe. So if a corporate houses or an executive of corporate house bribes a public servant, he or she will not be tried in the offense of corruption, but he or she will be tried under offense of abetment to corruption. But now we are proposing, as per the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, to criminalize the supply side of corruption directly, and also ensure that these are also taken care of in the Act. And even the commercial organizations will come under the ambit of PC Act. And there will be a mandatory requirement of corporate governance and transparency standards within the private organizations if they are undertaking business with government. And if that requisite corporate governance standards and transparency standards are not put into place, then if an individual executive of that organization is found to be committing some sort of bribe giving to a public servant, then the boards and the organization will also be liable. So the board, the highest body of that, the board of directors will be individually liable, and also there will be an administrative liability or penal liability of that organization. Also, this will also is likely to come in near future, in which the government is working. And of course, there is something which was a need also, that extension of protection of prior sanction to public servants who have ceased to be in office, that is retired public servants, so that they don't. So that the working civil servants do not have this fear of decision making, and so they start taking less decisions. They can become less dynamic because they think they may, after retirement of a superannuation, if some issue is scrutinized by anti-corruption agency, then they should not have to fend for themselves with no protection from the government, so that the bona fide decision makers can be protected. That sort of thing is also on the anvil. In practice, let's towards the end of my presentation, we will just go how can we analyze anti-corruption or ethical framework of any system. So, for example, we take an example of MP Local Area Development Scheme. So we see a situation where, for example, the honorable the member of parliament is of high integrity, and the district administration who are implementing the system are of low integrity. So what happens in practice? If in practice it happens that many times it happens that the work doesn't get through. The honorable MPs will protest that our implementation is not proper. Agencies are not working. Why they are not working? Because the honorable MP is ensuring that the work is done without any corruption or leakage, and the quality of work is good. There is huge oversight. This leads to the agency starting ignoring those works and delaying those works and becoming reluctant to under. So what happens then? It could be that the honorable MP sort of thinks that if I don't implement those development schemes, the people in his or her constituency may sort of become very annoyed by that the honorable MP are not sort of giving them due. Their needs are not being fulfilled through the development projects. So they will then sort of go easy and let the corrupt behavior of the agencies continue. So we ultimately come to the low band or the quadrant. On the other hand, if the political executive wants some sort of gratification through their own contractors, and if the public servant is resisting it, then many times it leads to a transfer of the public servant, and then we come back to the low situation. So if that is a situation where instead of these conflicting situations where either of the two are of different integrity levels, we are not taking the position to a high integrity levels but to a low integrity levels, then the ethical framework of that organization or that system is weak. So that is one way. Now we see the reverse example, the election process, where if the political executive doesn't want to implement election in the right spirit, but the system of election is such that they are forced to behave. So and on the other hand, if the public servant doesn't want to behave, then the system is such the election commission ensures that these people are transferred immediately and the right kind of civil servants are posted so that the election are conducted in free and fair manner. So we ultimately move towards the high quadrant, which is a good ethical framework. The election process is the system in India is of a very high ethical framework, which leads to elections being implemented peacefully and peaceful transfer of power, and the will of people is generally reflected. So this is one of a very simple framework by which any ethical system can be analyzed. So now we come to what are the challenges for public servants at today's world. We know that there are three kinds of public servants today. One is who are honest by the code, their sanskars or the ethical moral values are such that they will always at each step ask, am I doing a right thing or a wrong thing, and then decide accordingly. Then there are a large number of fence-sitters who will say, am I going to be caught? If I am going to be caught, then I may move towards ethical levels or the first category, and if I am not going to caught, I may shift towards the other parts. And then the third one is, no matter what the situation, I'm here to make money. So these are the incorrigible parts, and unfortunately what has happened is, which is again shown in the typical again same typology. The ideal situation is where a officer or the public servant is in high in integrity and high in efficiency, but there are situations in which because of so much of oversight going on, there is a tendency of some of the public servants who are high in integrity to move towards low in efficiency category. So these civil servants become evasive, risk averse, lacking decision making intention, and they become pile pushers. And this is one of the major challenges today. How can you convert these people of low efficiency and high integrity into achievers? And on the other hand, there are people who are low in integrity and high in efficiency, so-called dynamic officials who start ruling the rules. And these are the people who cause immense harm to the system, to the government in power, and also to the citizens. So the challenge today is how to ensure that we bring them back to the high efficiency and high integrity category. What protections are needed, what systems are needed, where the well-meaning bureaucrats can perform to the scale, and government is doing a lot of such initiatives to ensure that the officers work without any fear of the unknown of the future. So, what could we do strategy? First strategy, of course, is governance strategy. We'll discuss now towards the end, that how can we prevent. We can recall the Tracy's triangle where we were discussing the opportunity part, where the government systems can, if they are improved using technology, a lot of corruption can be reduced. So first is the recruitment process. So we know that the challenge is that this is the first interface for youth with government, the recruitment in government. And we know that there are complaints of paper leakages, mass copying, corruption. There is charges of favoritism in interviews in many of the state government recruitments. There are always in newspapers, there are inquiries. This leads to disillusionment of youth towards the government, because if the first interface with government is something which starts with the corruption or nepotism, then those youths coming into fresh into the government system will start with a sort of cynicism, and they will not perform as per the expectations of the people. So what is the governance measure being taken? It is discontinuation of interviews in Group B and below below levels. So it was considered that interviews are the biggest source of corruption and nepotism in recruitment, at least at the lowest level. At the high level, you need interviews because the personality, and there are less complaints also because we have a very sound ethics work in those bodies, or the UPSC or the similar bodies. But when the lower level it comes, then we have these issues. And so what we are government is implementing is written two-tier examination, where first tier is only for shortlisting and second tier again written for final merit. And if at all there is a skill test needed, then it is only for qualifying and marks not to be used for merit, because again there is a sort of subjectivity involved in skill test. So this was the Honorable Prime Minister's major initiative 2 years ago, which is now being implemented. So removing this interview, ensuring transparency in recruitment is a big challenge for governance, and unless this is brought into a very sound system, we will find disillusioned and youth entering the government system, and also with a lot of cynicism, which is something which they will propagate in the system also. The second major initiative which I would like to address is how to ensure citizen-centric service delivery. One of the major reasons for corruption in India is the government monopoly for delivery of services, which leads to complaints and corrupt behavior of public service many times. So what the measures which are being taken using technology is you have more trust-based systems with giving choices to citizens. So what are the processes of delivery of services? We have the registration of beneficiaries, for example, Manrega or any other scheme, scholarship for youths. So we should have multiple user-friendly channels for registration, for getting those service deliveries. Then beneficiary attestation or beneficiary selection, whether they are eligible or not. Should it be only left to only a single official to decide whether the beneficiary is eligible or not, or could it be converted into a community-based system where a community decides, and only those people are removed who the community sees are not following the requisite eligibility standards. Then there is the issue of authentication, whether there are no multiple beneficiaries or no fraudulent beneficiaries. So we already have a Aadhaar-based system where this is proposed to be removed, where all the ghost beneficiaries or duplicate beneficiaries will be removed to ensure complete transparency. And then the front-end delivery should also be multiple channels, and a private sector should also be included. The system of railway reservation, which has shown much improvement over the years, and that improvement is an evolving process, because there is always a fight between those who want to corrupt the system and those who want a transparent system, which is of course the larger share in the country. So when they try to breach the system, the new things come in to ensure that this is protected. And then comes the beneficiary validation. The validation of the beneficiary, whether the beneficiary is correct or not, should not be based on, it should be unobtrusive, and it should be less of instructions and more use of technology. And here we have a very good system of integration of welfare and economic databases. By Telangana's initiative of state of Telangana's initiative of Integrated People Information Hub, IPIH. So without using Aadhaar card, they have tried to integrate all the databases of property details, the car vehicle registrations, and so many details with the welfare database to check whether if a person has availed a benefit based on an economic criteria, and if that economic criteria or the financial criteria is also being confirmed by these databases, and if it is not confirmed, it is in conflict, then further inquiry is taken. And that has led to the decision of 13 to 15% of we can say the inclusion errors. The inclusion errors are those where wrong beneficiaries were included for any welfare benefit. So those 13 to 15% wrong beneficiaries who are included could be excluded from the system using this integration of the databases without using Aadhaar card, which is of course something which is under judicial scrutiny. So but through technology we can develop, and that's how the focus of the government is, to use technology to improve the welfare governance and have more and more cashless transactions directly going to the beneficiary through the direct benefit transfer. And then the third one which I would like to mention is the e-tendering and the GEM platform. E-tendering, we know that procurement is something which is a source of major complaints of corruption. So the objective is to have right product at right prices and right time. And the measures is, first, government has launched a government e-marketplace or GEM platform, which provides real-time basis procurement based on requirements and specifications. Where options are available for goods and services based, which are just like Amazon or Flipkart, something like that only. The price determination is market based. The lowest price is determined by market automatically. There is online ordering and payment, so there is no harassment of payment or delayed because of any wrongful action by the public servants. And there is convenient facility for vendor registration, because when vendors are not free to register, then there is always a problem of correct price determination. So there is a facility for easy vendor registration. So this GEM platform, which is being launched, will transform the way government procures and will reduce the discretion available with the public servants and procurement, and help getting the right price. And of course, e-tendering in the civil works is something which has been implemented again in Government of India, and where all the civil works tendering, instead of the old manual system of registering the contractor and giving the tender form at a single place, where there used to be a lot of collusion and a lot of muscle power being used to prevent the registration, so that the price of a tender can be colluded and there could be some sort of formation of cartels. Now this e-tendering system tends to remove these cartels, and it helps in reducing the prices, the cost on which the works are being undertaking. And already there are reports that based on the schedule of rates, the estimates when the e-tendering was done, the contractors who were selected after the process were able to not only reduce the cost, but the cost or the tendering amount was finally reduced by 10 to 15% through this e-tendering process, which shows that how much margin was there when the tendering process was non-transparent and opaque. So these are the three examples which I have mentioned, is something which the government has undertaken to ensure that at least the opportunity part can be reduced to that extent, and the public servants who want to, well-meaning, who want to work in a transparent system are facilitated, and those who have these tendencies of corrupt behavior can be controlled by not giving them opportunity. So thank you very much for this hearing me out. I'll try to bring into the focus the types of corruption which a common man has to face, the theoretical framework, the situation which emerges because of the political, social, administrative and legal situation in India, how we can take it forward using technology, but there are some aspects which the society has to take care, so that the fight against corruption becomes a holistic fight and we succeed as per our expectations. Thank you very much.
Hello? Hello, sir? Sir, any issues?
Yeah, please tell me. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Sir, the PPT went off. Any issues?
I hope it went off okay after the initial glitches.
So now it's over. Over, is it? Session is over?
Yeah, I've said thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing, can you just ask anyone if they have any questions and they can send it through chat option.
Okay, so should I go back and ask that? Okay.
No, they're already there. Actually, there is one question.
Yeah, please.
I'm
sitting here.
Yeah, so you
Any
have
questions?
the chat
I'm welcome.
window.
Questions are welcome. I'm continuing here. I thought it's only 1 hour session, but I'm available for now also for a few minutes as far as whenever till whatever time you so want, and I can also answer questions later on also. Yeah, I'm available. Please.
So there, can you just check the chat window in your system?
Yeah, chat. So there is a chat window. Yeah. But the chat window doesn't have any. Will it show any question?
There is one question. He has asked. Let me read it to you. It's Dr. Subramania Swami's take on corruption has been one of strong pursuing of key prominent leaders to send a message. Is that the strategy being followed? Sorry, something is correct.
No, but how can I see the question? Can you tell me? Because
it's there on the chat, sir. Can you just click on chat icon?
no, I have chat icon is on the right side down in the corner.
Yes.
Just a minute.
You can see Dr. Subramania Swami's take. From Samir Kagalkar, there is one question.
Chat. Where is this chat? Chat.
On top, sorry, on bottom right, if you click on the chat on the top right, it will come on the bottom.
It's coming on the back right. It's coming, but I don't see the question here.
Okay, let me send it to you.
We have these questions. All those questions of not able to hear and all those things are there. But if you,
okay, I'm just sending it to you. This question.
Yeah. Either you can repeat it or you can send it. Yeah, here it is. Now it is here.
You can just read the question.
Of course, this strategy is being implemented in a very big way in government, and in fact, there are few very important initiatives which has come in papers also, and it has started from ensuring that there is least amount of lobbying in government recruitments. So the government is ensuring that recruitments at the highest level, secretary, additional secretary, joint secretary, or even chief executives of public sector undertakings, that process is such that there is least amount of lobbying, and there are the people and officers are selected on merit, and they don't have to run around here and there to get selected. And if you take a feedback from people from various quarters, this thing has been confirmed, and so. Right from the recruitment till down to the governance, the effort is to ensure that systems are there which are able to ensure prevention of corruption of public servants and also citizen-centric behavior in governance, right till the grassroots level. So that has always been the policy of all the ministries and departments, and also Department of Personnel, which is the policy making, coordinating or the nodal body for prevention of corruption. The other question is, how does the Anti-Corruption Act takes care of corruption by the political fraternity of dividing the people in the name of caste and also giving undue advantage to certain sector of society to improve their vote base? As I've mentioned, that Anti-Corruption Act will not take care of this, because a person becomes public servant only after he or she gets elected and assumes a public office. But there are election laws which take care of this issue of corruption in elections, bribing of voters, campaigning in caste and communal lines. But the point remains here is that that ultimately it is also the people who have to take care of. There are laws and regulations which CEC and the Chief Election Commission, the Central Election Commission, unveils a stick whenever there is campaign on caste or communal lines. But the people also have to take care of that. They need not be swayed by emotions when the election comes and vote on governance lines. And it is the cases have been shown in across the country where when the people have given the right signal of voting on the lines of good governance, the government, the party in power which has been finally selected by that process, also undertakes measures which are for the expectation of the people. So ultimately, that signal gets converted into good governance, and when the political executive has that vision, then the public servants also behave properly. They also know that they cannot live now without actually doing service to the people for which they were hired or recruited.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Sir, actually, Shrikant have asked one question. The question says like, are there any opportunities to do volunteer work, part-time or pro bono basis with government departments? You got it, sir?
Okay. See, actually, there are what has happened is that there are several ministries and governments have initiated internship programs. These internship programs are publicized. Of course, the lead was taken by the Planning Commission, erstwhile Planning Commission, and now the Niti Aayog, where these interns were selected and they worked within the government and helped because they were the young MBA graduates, technical side, from the humanity side, experts who helped the government in getting the fresh perspective on public policy and also gain in experience. Then the state government have also taken a lot of initiatives to recruit interns and young professionals at the government level, in many times the chief minister's office, to help them in running these. Their opportunities are rising and will continue to rise because there is a thought process in government that there has to be a continuous infusion of fresh talent and also fresh ideas from directly from through the professional and experience, and this will continue to rise, and we have this opportunity of young professionals who work for 2-3 years, then they move ahead, maybe in the corporate sector or in the NGO sector or maybe in the government through the competitive exam. So that opportunity is rising. Any other question? Any other question?
Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Sir,
Any other question?
here, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
So actually, he's asking like a part-time or a pro bono basis. I think you mentioned that as well.
Part-time or no? Actually, the part-time basis is something which in government we don't have this policy of working part-time. Either there is a full-time recruitment process or there is a system of internship. But of course, we have many times, especially at the district level and even the state level, where we have implementation schemes. There are occasions where the help of volunteers are taken. Maybe purely on voluntary basis or through a payment of a very nominal sort of fund to help the administration in implementing some schemes. And I can give you an example of such an initiative which was successful. For example, in the Kumbh Mela of Allahabad, where I happened to be a part of that organization, where for various kinds of challenges of crowd management, of getting the CSR initiative, for improving the pilgrim satisfaction, for better policing, for improving sort of relief to pilgrims, lot of private participation through volunteers schools, colleges. Then we had this issue of clean Ganga or clean Kumbh mission, where volunteers came and they helped in terms of improving the facilities, and it was a very successful partnership. So there are occasions where such volunteers are part-time use. They come for a specific purpose and then they move out. But then it depends. There's not a codified system. It depends on the initiative of the administration of that place, where and of course government encourages such participation. But then it's not a codified system where it has to be done. It's an advisory. It's something which we try to facilitate through advisories to the officers or the departments. And many times when they do it, the results are very positive.
Hello.
Yeah.
Asa, I think you got any questions? I think we are done, I guess.
Okay, fine. Nothing. Thank you for this patient hearing. Thank you, and apologies for a little technical glitch initially. More because of my inexperience in handling this. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you on behalf of LMA office as well. Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking this.